Good morning. It's 9:15. We'll call the meeting to order. Looks like we have a quorum. Does anyone have any additions to the agenda today? If not, if I could have a motion from one of the council members speaking into a microphone to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Oh, Robin moved to approve it, and then Mark seconded it. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, that takes us on to 3A, the special use permit for Cashiers Village. Let's reopen the hearing at this time. And next, I'm going to throw it to staff to present this letter that we received.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What the council has in front of you is a letter from Mr. Craig Justice, the counsel for the applicant, who is writing on behalf of his client to formally withdraw the application from our agenda. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would like to ask that the letter be admitted into evidence and into the record. And at this time, I think it would also be appropriate if the council would officially close the hearing.
Okay. Do we need a motion to close the hearing?
Yes, it would be good to have a motion and a second and a vote to close the hearing.
So first off, we'll admit this letter into evidence. Second, do I have a motion to close the hearing? Dave Bond makes the motion to close the hearing. Seconded by Debbie. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, that ends the public hearing. Moving on to new business. 3B, call for public hearing for the text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO Article 9, Section 9.3 of the Cashiers Commercial Area, Figure 9.1 and 9.2. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We are bringing this before you. We did initially ask for that to be, and we thought we could meet a timeline for today's meeting to conduct that hearing. We are working with a graphic that is a little bit older, and so it's much more difficult to amend the figures that we need to look at. I believe staff has a way to do that now when we are prepared to move forward. What we're asking, what the figures represents is it erroneously has a maximum building size in the figure, although the text does not and never intended to have a maximum building size. This was an error in the graphic through the adoption of the UDO process. We would like to fix that to clarify that standard does not exist, that the only standard that the Cashiers Area Commercial District ever had was what square footage triggered a special use application requirement and a hearing before this board. And that has changed over the years, but there was never intended, and the council never approved in the last 17 years, a maximum building size. So we'd like to address that at a public hearing and move forward with that technical correction.
So when do you propose that at our next meeting?
That would be, we would propose that to be, yes, March 22nd. We would ask the council to consider doing that public hearing over Zoom because we know there'll be a lot of interest and folks that may want to speak on this issue. It's going to be easier to conduct that type of hearing because we still have limits in numbers of people that can come and meet in person and speak to you in person. I will also, if I can, take a minute to remind the board that this is a legislative process. In this process, you're making a recommendation. So the rules of the quasi-judicial procedure do not apply. You can have conversations about this amendment. You can respond to emails. You can answer questions. That all is perfectly acceptable in this process. So if you wish to speak to folks about this, that's well within your prerogative under this process, and they can also speak to you which is a little bit different than the hearing we just closed out. And Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions for staff, we'll be glad to answer those.
I don't think we have any questions at this time. I think let's just go ahead and schedule this hearing for this amendment, text amendment to this figure. And let's go ahead and do it by Zoom. I think everyone would agree that is safer and healthier still at this point.
Excuse me.
I think we're all done.
Mr. Chairman, one other point.
Excuse me. Can anyone hear me?
This,
Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. Is there going? We would like to have
Just
the
mute
ability to.
everybody. Mr. Chairman, one other thing about doing it through Zoom is if you do this through Zoom in the public hearing, we will have to meet again. There's a 20 in the legislation, and Heather may be able to address this a little bit better than I will. It requires a 24-hour period between the hearing date and any recommendation you may make. So there's a minimum of a 24-hour period. That's to allow folks to email you that couldn't make the meeting or couldn't avail themselves of Zoom. Is that correct, Heather?
Yes, under the legislation that the General Assembly passed during this COVID time for remote meetings, if you have even one member meeting remotely and you have a public hearing, you do have to allow 24 hours of additional public comment before you make a decision on that hearing.
So you'd have to meet and then re-meet?
And you can do that by Zoom.
Oh, okay.
So that does not have to be an
Is it-
in-person meeting, correct, Heather?
Correct. What the commissioners do, for instance, is usually recess for a day or two and then come back and have a brief meeting where they address the public hearing, address the issue related to the public hearing, and then close out their meeting.
Is that fine with everybody on the council? So we would have to meet on the 22nd, and then at some point, a day or 2 or 3 after, just get back together for a couple minutes, see if there's been any relevant public comment to consider, and then we would make our final recommendation to the county commissioner. Is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Is everyone good with that? I think if everyone seems to be good with that, let's go ahead and schedule it that way.
We will.
And then other than that. if
Excuse
nobody
me,
else
is there
has
going to be any
business,
public
I would ask for a
comment?
motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a,
Well, hold on one second. I do want to address just one other thing before we get out of here.
You're one thing in me, Mike.
What's
Go
that?
ahead. Go ahead.
We wanted to make the board aware that in March, what we'll also come back to the board with is some suggestions. Through this process, we've got a great deal of feedback from the community, and it's not dissimilar to some feedback that we've gotten in our other zone communities in Cullowhee and in 441 and their boards about the quasi-judicial process being, difficult on these large scale developments and doesn't quite allow as much community input and process as they may like to see. So what we will do is bring forth some ideas and thoughts about how this board or this council may look to address some of those issues if they so choose. It may be moving us from quasi-judicial processes to some other processes that would also allow for more community involvement earlier on in the process and then throughout. So we want to also bring back some of those recommendations. They won't come to you in form of a public hearing. We're not to that point yet, but we do want to start the conversation about that. And you may be getting some feedback from this community as well. So we want to make you aware of that as well. Heather, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add to that, Mr. Chairman. I did just want to make you aware that you have somebody that's been trying to unmute and speak throughout the meeting. You did not
Who's
have the opportunity for public hearing on here, but you as a council can choose to hear from anybody you want to hear from.
Yeah.
That was Mr. Pendergrass, I believe.
Mr. Pendergrass, do you have something that you can fit into 3 minutes?
Yes.
Can we turn him up a little, please? Thank you.
Are the council meetings just never open for
No,
public?
Mr. Pendergrass, you're not able to be heard right now. Do we not have a speaker set up?
The reason it's not set up is there was no opportunity for public comment today, so they haven't planned for it, but I think it'll just take them a minute.
All right, Pendergast, let's, can you do a test?
Okay. Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you have a brief comment?
Yes, we had emailed earlier and suggested that in lieu of simply deleting what is contended to be a mistake, there should be deliberation of what to substitute it with. And I would hope that the public hearing, if any, was held on that broader but highly relevant subject. And that the suggestion was, let's get it right. And I would invite one of your council members to make a substitute motion to move the county to retain a planning consultant and conduct community meetings with regard to a review of the zoning of the Cashiers zoning ordinance, including the building size question. The ordinance says that the buildings are to be small in scale. And so the building size limit, even if a mistake, was consistent with that, but it should not simply be deleted. It should be replaced with something more appropriate if that's what the community and the council and the board and the commission feel is appropriate. But it should be done through a good planning process rather than just the wave of a wand.
Is
I
that
agree
almost?
with that also, that we need to make a serious consideration.
Who is talking now?
This is Paul Anderson. I'm on the,
We can't, sorry, we have to go about this orderly fashion. We can't just have Craig into Paul. Craig, are you finished?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Paul, did you want to say something?
yes, thank you. I sent all of you a email yesterday stating my position on this, and I agree with Mr. Pendergrass that we can't just simply delete and have no limit on building sizes in Cashiers. We need a planning process that will address this and come up with some specific guidance on that for future development. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. All right, is anyone else trying to unmute and speak from Zoom? Are we going to close public comment that got added to our thing here? So I guess you make a note that we had a public comment section in the agenda before the adjournment. All right, to you gentlemen, thank you very much for your points. There will be, of course, an opportunity to speak at the public comment regarding this. But at this time, I think it's reasonable just to leave that with the same title that we had before. Could I now have a motion to adjourn? Debbie Stewart makes a motion to exhort, seconded by Robin Ashmore. All in favor? Aye. Aye.